Hi there, I'm Peter Millard, and in this week's 10-minute workshop, well, I'm going to take you through a little commercial job, but with a bit of a twist. That's coming up next. So one of the questions that comes up fairly regularly, often from guys who are starting out or thinking about starting out, is how do you get the gear? How do you get the fancy tools and equipment? And the short answer is you have to work up to it. You start off with relatively cheap tools, as everybody does, because very, very few people have the cash to throw at a fully equipped workshop with all the bells and whistles when they're first starting out. But it got me thinking, what if, or is it possible to use a job to be entirely self-funding? So instead of trying to make money out of a job, could you actually use the cost of a job not just to buy the materials, but to actually buy the tools to do the job as well? And I've got a little commercial job on the books just now, and it was pretty much the perfect candidate for this kind of thing. So let me tell you about it, and we'll go from there. So this is a little job that I've got to do for a client that I've worked for a lot over the years. Haven't seen her for a little while, but she's got a few bits and pieces. There's quite a few bits going on here, but this is the one that I'm concentrating on. It's a set of tall shelves to go into a bedroom. It's 560 wide, quite tall, 2200, but only 150 deep. So not a huge piece. Fixed centre shelf and 3 adjustables above that and 4 below, so we can vary the heights of those for different sized things. There's no back to it. This is going to be planted onto a wardrobe that I made a fair few years ago, and it's still holding up very well. Thank you very much for asking. So fairly straightforward, fairly simple. 150 deep, 560 wide, 2200 tall, MDF box, sprayed finish, and all nice and simple and straightforward. Price for this particular part was £745. That's basically a couple of days' work to throw it together, paint it, pop it over there, and nail it to the side of the wardrobe, basically onto the end of the wardrobe. So not a huge amount of work involved. Decent money for it, fairly ordinary. But it got me thinking, could you use that 745 quid? Can you actually buy the tools as well as the materials and still turn a profit? Now, fairly obviously, I'm not going to go out and buy tools that I've already got, but every time I use a tool on this build, there'll be a ka-ching sort of sound, and you'll know that something is being racked up. This means that the object of the exercise, as with all business, is to make as much money as possible at the end of it. So obviously, I'm going to be leaning towards the cheaper tools that I have. I'll be digging out the Titan track saw again rather than using the Festool. The bench, the MFT here will just be a flat bench. I won't be using the drop-down rail or any of that sort of stuff. It's entirely down to me what I use. I could probably do the whole thing very cheaply just by using a handsaw, but that would take me a long time. So, time is money. The whole point of this is to turn a profit on it. So let's get cracking and see what we can do with the budget in hand. Now, one of the best ways of using your budget, of course, would be to have all the cutting done, and that's what I normally do, I have to say, but not quite in the spirit of this particular exercise. The whole point is not only to come away with as much money as possible, but also come away with a decent set of tools that you can then do the next job with. So I will be digging out the Titan track saw for this. I've done a cutting list. It's slightly more than a half sheet of MDF, but I've got some little bits of scrap that I'll be able to use up as well. So let's get cracking and get cutting. So with all the bits and pieces in position, I can rip strips off the MDF for the carcass, sides, top, base and centre shelf. Then reducing the size slightly and cutting strips for the adjustable shelves. And that's it for the long rail, time to break it down for storage. No fancy Festool MFT in this build, so I'm making a simple cross-cut jig from scrap MDF and double-sided tape, first fixing the top fence, and then the bottom, and then I square the rail up against the fence and locate it with some little stops. Then we can cut a test cut to give us a cut line and also check for square. With everything satisfactory, I'm trimming the carcass sides to length, and then setting a stop for the top, base and fixed shelf, cutting them to size quickly and easily. The adjustable shelves need to be a little narrower, so I'm using a 3mm packer up against the stop and then rattling through the 7 cuts needed for those shelves. Okay, well that's all the cutting done. A little cross-cut jig works fine. It's it's a really simple, easy little thing to set up. And obviously, if you wanted to make it a little bit more sophisticated, you could put T-track in here and have a stop in there, a flag stop or whatever, or indeed V-slot stuff. But for a little one-off thing like this, a little block of wood double taped down does just fine. So we've got the 2 long pieces, the sides cut. We've got the top, the bottom and the middle shelf cut, which are the same depth as the sides, obviously. And we've got the adjustable shelves, which are slightly slimmer. They're set back slightly. I'm actually going to set back the fixed centre shelf as well, but I'm going to do that after. I'm going to trim that back after I've marked out we're going to use dowels. So after I've marked out for the dowels, I'll because obviously we're working off the front face. It gets complicated if the centre shelf is set back. You've got to calculate the offset and all that. Much easier just to keep it the same depth to start with and then trim that back afterwards. So that's what we'll do next. And then, yeah, that's what we'll do next.